Good evening, everyone. This is Pradeep Mal, Ambassador of Change from GETI, the Global Education and Training Institute of Lucknow. We are the premier institute for training teachers and principals in India and many parts of the world. And we have many in-service and pre-service programs. And for more information on this, please go to 740-840-1000. Right now, you are on our disruptive education platform provided to us by our mentor, Dr. Sunita Gandhi. And on this platform, we have met with and interacted with more than 1,450 educators from India and all over the world. And this evening, we have for you Professor Husnain Mukhdoom. He is the principal of the STARS group of colleges in Kot Addu in Lahore, Pakistan. He has done his BA and an MA in English Literature and an MPhil, and he has 11 years of experience. He also enjoys reading and internet research. He has participated and presented his research papers in the Tariq Ali, the Stone Woman, in the first RIPA International Conference on Language and Literature and Culture in 2021. He has also participated in the first International Research Congress conference on teaching English to speakers of other languages, TESOL, also in 2021. And he's been recognized as a resource speaker in the International Conference for Innovation and Sustainable Development Goals, ICISDG 2022, organized by 2ISTDIG from Nigeria. National and international awards and certificates. He's been awarded the Global Education Leader Award 2021 by International Internship University from India. The TESOL certified from Society of Teachers, Researchers, Administrators, Professionals and Students from the Philippines. A certificate of appreciation for sharing his knowledge from the IIU BIKEP 11 from the International Internship University, again in India. Then from another university in Romania, he has a certificate of recognition as a resource speaker from the International Conference for Innovation and Sustainable Development Goals from Nigeria, and another certificate of appreciation, bridging the gap between digital divide, again from Nigeria. So he has several accolades to his name, and his professional expertise in his management and negotiation, discipline and time management, brand marketing and business development, communication and promotion. So he's a multifaceted man. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Good evening. And he will be speaking to us in education through literature. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for having me here and giving me many beautiful words as well. I'm thankful to you, Mr. Pradeep Mal, for giving me the chance of to share my experiences, philosophies, and thoughts. Today, I would share my take on education through literature. When we use the term literature, uh, there comes a lot of ideas. First one is it is a widely used term. Uh, According to other definitions, it might be a composed fiction, stories, poetry, drama, and many other genres. But I call it life on pages, a society on pages, a history on pages, and all the pleasures on pages. How? When we call life on pages, what does it mean? It means when a writer picks up his pen to write something, he brings all the events, all the happenings, all the situations of life of uh, happening in a society, and when it brings to the pages, and the reader doesn't need to go anywhere to study the a society, history, he can very simply read or study all those pages written by the author. And ultimately, the people who have great taste of literature, they usually get pleasures from literature. Literature exists since the human being came on this earth, because when the human being came on the earth, they started telling stories, they started saying something to each and other, and when it has been started writing, it became on the books. Ever since I was small, stories have been a part of my life. For example, reading books and listening to our grandparents' stories before bed became a part of my natural order, where I could escape into another world. This is not only with me, but I suppose this is with all the people around the world. When they are children, uh, they usually listen to the stories from their parents. Obviously, this is the first education we get from our parents, through the stories, through the happenings. And when we are children, we are mostly unable to understand what the others are saying, but when our parents tell us, we listen very carefully and we grasp the thoughts, meanings and ideas. And according to psychology, the childhood ideas, the childhood stories, they are the most prominent impressions on the human mind. To say the least, not much has changed, and on most nights. For example, not mostly in the days, but on most of the nights, mostly children listen to the stories of their parents. But when we talk about literature, it is much more than that. I'm just talking that from where we started learning through literature. Obviously, it was our uh, childhood, and literature has transcended time and is still with us, forming critical parts of today's curriculum. So, relevance does literature have in modern society? We are passing through the society which is modern, and we may say that this is super modern. How the world has totally changed in this century, and everything has been digitized. We have less readers and more watchers. For example, we watch on screen, we watch movies, we watch different things, but we uh, read less. So, my take is how we can learn through literature what is real education, and how we can grasp the real education through literature. So, literature also helps us to create empathy and understanding. Because my subject is literature, and I feel that how much deeply literature has impacted me. And nonetheless, we can say that there are different types of souls. For example, a few or most of the minds are scientific. They usually take 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. That means they are more scientific and less philosophical. So, according to many literary critics, literature improves theory of mind. Obviously, I would suggest to read all my audience, all my viewers, Sigmund Freud, one of uh, the father of psychology, and Dr. Viktor Frankl, and Dr. Carl Jung. These are the most prominent figures of psychology who gave different theories of mind. Obviously, previously they have been taken as a medical theories, but in the present era they have become literary theories. One of the most important or most beautiful theory I have applied in my research, that was logotherapy. It has become a literary theory, and I suggest everyone to read this, because uh, when we lose or when we are unable to find what is the purpose of our life and how we have to find the purpose of life, it it is pretty difficult. But when we study the theory of logotherapy by Dr. Viktor Frankl, we come to a point that meanings exist in every situation of life, in every uh, catastrophic situation of life. So, theory of mind, which is the capacity to read the minds of others. These are not only theoretical but my own experience. When I teach my students, I can read their minds. It is only because of literature that we have studied all the characters in our literature. And I suppose all the literatures of society are present in literature on the pages. When we study all those characters, when we study their psychology, when we study how writer has presented all those uh, all those characters, then we simply we can say that these are not 100% true, but they are 99 or 95% true characters of the society. Now you can flash back to your mind that how many books of literature have you studied, and you can correlate the characters on your pages and the characters in the society. You will find almost 100% or 99% or 95% similarity if you go to the deep roots. So when someone reads, he or she literally reads the mind of readers, since they have access to the character's internal thoughts. I know two most influential authors, writers of the society. All of the literary minds must read those two writers. One is James Joyce, and the other is Virginia Woolf. Both the writers speak through the psychology of their characters, and when they speak through their characters, we find their characters are silent most of the time, and their psychology is speaking. So it is a deep understanding of our characters, and the characters are not only on the pages, but they are present in the real life. For the majority of people around the world, our first serious encounter with literature comes from school. Reading and writing has been drilled in all of us from an early age, and this is set in motion with the start of examination. So, as I am talking about literature, education through literature. Usually, our system compels our students to just read the books, to just question the answers, or answer the questions, are just making a copy paste. They are not flourishing and nurturing the minds with the true meanings or true concepts of literature. For example, the stories in the books for the children at school level or at college level, they are not only to be read, but they are to be grasped, they are to be correlated with the society. So, if there are audience who are teachers, and they are teacher of literature or of any language, they can correlate all the characters with the society so that the students can have more and better understanding. So, how we can learn uh, through literature, and how literature is linked with history and society. Being able to empathize with a group of characters written on a page is categorical, and from a student's perspective, is a necessary skill. For example, when we study some books, when we study some pages, and we come across different characters, and they can be heroic, they can be villainous characters as well. Both are all sort of characters are the part of a society, either they are good or they are bad. While studying those characters, we must understand that these are not only the fictionary characters, but they are the real characters of life. You can go back in your subconscious, unconscious mind that how many books till this age you have studied, and you can find all those appealing characters, those who influenced you. You can see either they are present in your own homes, in your own society, in your neighbors. As I believe, when I study all the characters, I find them in my surroundings, I find them in my house, I find them in my colleagues, in my society. All are present. So it is necessary, it is very compulsory, it is mandatory for our students to comprehend, to understand all the perspectives of those characters. It is a skill how to analyze the characters and how to correlate or interlink them with the society. Additionally, the ability to sense themes and messages opens us up to another way of thinking. There are five genres in English literature, and it can be in others, many others in other languages. But most influential genre has been considered poetry. In all the languages, poetry has been considered the most influential genre. So poetry is to write something in fewer words while giving a lot of great themes and messages. So at first we ourselves, then our students, they must have the ability. If they uh, don't have, we must enhance, we must produce the ability to sense all the themes and messages what the writer is trying to say, what the writer is trying to impress. For example, if we talk about poetry, because it has been a major concern in our syllabi of all the classes. So when we study a poetry, we just translate them, we just give them one idea. But I believe there are not only single ideas in any poem, in any verse, but there are a lot of ideas. There are many ideas, and we have to explore all of them. We use two terms. I don't know either you are aware of them or not. Basically, they are from psychology. One is the latent content, and the other is manifest content. Latent content and manifest content, these two terms have been used by psychologists, especially Sir Sigmund Freud. For example, we read poetry, what is written in the words, what is written on the page is its manifest content. And what is hidden behind those words, what is hidden ideas, what is hidden messages, what is hidden themes, these are all latent content. I will make you understand through an example. For example, we all have dreams, and when we wake up, we forget almost the major parts of those dreams. What we uh, what we remember and can tell to others, the part of dream, that is the manifest content, and what we have forgotten, that is the latent content. And according to literature, according to psychology, latent content is more important, and we have to find what is there. In the same way, when we are teaching our students, when we are teaching our young ones, so literature is the major source to train them. For example, there are a lot of so-called or motivational speakers. What do? They simply tell a story. Usually these are self-made stories, these are fictionary stories. But when we listen a story, and then at the end we conclude a lesson, it becomes more appealing. Now, for example, in our syllabus, we have studied a thirsty crow. Where there is will, there is a way. He who seeks finds. There are many lessons, there are many moral lessons, and this is not easy to make our student understand. Where there is will, there is a way. This is not easy. But when we tell a story that once upon a time there was a crow, he was very thirsty, he went here and there, and we tell a story. When we are telling a story, our young ones or the elder ones, they get an image. When the story is moving on, when the story is passing on, an image is becoming in their mind. When we say once on a time there was a thirsty crow, so there comes an image of a crow uh, that is sitting somewhere and he is very thirsty, and he is thinking from where he can get water. There becomes an image. When we say he flew here and there, we see in our mind, we imagine that he is flying in restlessness to find water, but he becomes very sad, or and he knows nothing where to find. But lastly, here lies the message. He does not he does not give up. He does not give up. He keeps on trying. He went here and there. He did what he could. At last, when he went to an orchard, to a garden, there becomes an image of a garden, of an orchard. There lies a pitcher of water. There is a very low water. There is always an image, and these images appeal us. In the same way, the stories, the poetries, whatever in the literature is, there becomes an image, so it becomes so easy to make an understanding for our students. This is how literature works. This is how literature appeals. The most ancient yawn of any literature is story. Telling is since the human came to the earth. It is from the beginning, and when he came there, he started telling stories, he started listening stories. So this is how literature works. This is how all the motivational speakers, inspirational speakers, are we in our daily lives. When we are going to tell anything, we take a support of any story, we take a support of any incident, any happening, and we tell a story, and then we conclude a lesson, and that becomes a general truth. We can say that, for example, honesty is the best policy. It has always been narrated through a moral story. That's why our young ones can understand easily. The next is, literature allows a person to step back in time, and this is how literature works with history. Literature allows a person to step back in time and learn about life on earth from the ones who walked before us. For example, we cannot go in the previous centuries, we cannot go 3000 years ago, 2000 years ago. But when we read, when we study Greek literature, there comes all the images, all the stories of those people. How did they survive? How did they live? What were their housing schemes? What were their literature? What were their customs and traditions? This is only through literature. History is something different, but literature is something different. Literature not only tells us what has happened in sequence or chronological order, but it tells us how it happened, why it happened. It gives the answers of all the questions: how, when, why. This gives all the answers, and we feel very pacified that we have studied the past. So it also allows us, it also gives us the opportunity to go back and if my audience have studied Greek literature, that's a good thing. If they haven't studied yet, I would recommend them to read a few ones so that we can understand, how the past of literature was um, bright. We can gather a better understanding of culture and have a greater appreciation of them. And we may not go in other nations' history. We can observe, we can study our own culture, our own history in the previous centuries. It was the best and it was the richest culture of the world, that was Indo-Pak culture. And unfortunately, the literature, the books that have been composed, that have been written on our culture, they are mostly colonized, and the colonials composed those books and narrated and described our elders, our forefathers as a brutes, as a ignorant people, but that is not a truth. Our culture was the best culture, our culture was the richest culture. So history have history literature gives a true understanding of every era. We learn through the ways of history is recorded in the forms of manuscripts and through speech itself. When we study history, it is interesting because history runs on or moves on in chronological order. There are incidents, there are happenings, there are wars, there are different things. Uh, that's why it also becomes very interesting for us. Now, impact of literature. Impact of literature has been very keen in every age, in every era. I would talk about, because we are passing through the modern society, and the impact of literature is still undeniable in this era. Literature acts as a form of expression for each individual author. Literature acts as a form of expression, individual author. Every author, every writer has a different perspective of understanding, a different observation of society. So he writes, he gives a different expression, but we can choose the authors, the books of our own choice. Some books mirror society and allow us to better understand the world we live in. This is the most beautiful sentence. Obviously, books, if they are written in true sense, if they are written by heart and soul, just like I would like to remind all of you, the biggest, the most influential philosopher of the subcontinent. It was none. Every word by Sadat Hassan Manto mirrors our society. Uh, what Sadat Hassan Manto had written, uh, have spoken of, no other writer could dare that, and allow us to better understand the world we live in. Sadat Hassan Manto says, if you gets angry on my words, if you gets angry on my writings, that simply means you are not fully aware of your surroundings. He is damn true in his writings, because what he writes, it is a biting stare. It is biting stare. uh, Common people, common man, they cannot bear the stare of Sadat Hassan Manto. So he is one of the most influential writer. I suppose all the mature minds must read his all the fictionary books, because these are the true mirror of our society, what happened in the society, and others didn't talk about it, but he wrote, and it is his excellent work, and it made him immortal. The other is literature is reflection of humanity. As I have earlier talked about it, it is the of humanity, reflection of society, reflection of human being, reflection of our minds, reflection of our good and bad deeds, a reflection of our customs, of our traditions, either they are good or they are bad. This is the literature is the reflection of our realities, what we have constructed for us, for our societies. So it is a way for us to understand each other. When we study literature, we can understand each other. For example, uh, a person cannot visit all the countries or all the regions of the world. So how he could understand all these regions or people of the regions? It will simply he has to study the books. He has to study the literature of those countries. By listening to the voice of other person, we can live to figure out how the individual thinks. We have to listen the voices of other persons. Here voices of other persons have dual meanings. One is what are spoken voices, and the others are others which are not spoken. These are the silent voices. Silent voices, what others can't say, but we have to listen those voices. It is a pretty beautiful but pretty difficult technique to listen the unsaid words, to listen the silent voices. uh, when I say, if you are able to listen the voice or sound of a blooming flower, when it blooms, there might be and there is a small or very very small voice which might not be audible by human ear, but if someone is able to listen to that voice, it means he or she can listen to the voices of a breaking heart. Obviously, there is a voice when a heart breaks, when a tyranny happens, when something mishappens, there is a voice. And if we study literature, if we study between the lines, we will be able to understand and to listen all those voices, and we will begin to figure out how the individual thinks. This is most beautiful thing. We have to understand how the individuals think. Everyone has the right to think what he wants. We must not uh, imply our own ideas, our own thinking on others. I believe that literature is important because of its purpose in a society which is becoming increasing detached from human interaction. Novels create a conversation. Obviously, my complete talk is on the importance of literature and its purpose in our society. And it's a medium, it's a way to teach our students. It is through reading great literary and poetic works that one understands life. I suppose this is the deep and beautiful words. When we read some literary and poetic works, I would elaborate in such a way that literary and poetic works are those, for example, a written line, a written page, a written book, a spoken verse, or whatever it is. But how and why it will become a literary and poetic. It will become literary and poetic when it has deep philosophy, when it has a deep message, when it has a deep theme, when it has a great sense of society, a great sense of pleasure, a great sense of delight. It becomes literary and poetic. For example, all of you, uh, when we hear a song, a poetic verse, and we learn by heart at once. Why? What's the reason behind that? Because it touches our heart, because it touches our soul, and we feel that this poetic verse, this literary work has been written, has been recited only for me. That's why we learn it by heart at once. This is how literature or literary and poetic works work. They help a person take a closer look at the different facts of living. This is literature that makes a man most sensitive to take a different look at the different aspects of life. Uh, for instance, a thing, a matter, and a happening that is quite ordinary, that is quite ordinary for an ordinary man, it will be extraordinary for an author, for a writer, for an artist. It will be an extraordinary thing, and he will write, he will create many his poetic works on it. In many ways, literature in its different forms can change one's perspective towards living. One is how we observe the living things, how we observe the life in our society, in our surrounding. This is one thing. The other thing is this: by observing different sorts of lives, different sorts of happenings, how our attitude, how our thinking becomes towards the our own living. uh, for instance, there is a one act play, The Oyster and the Pearl, William Saroyan. There is a character of a barber. He gives the definition of life. He is a barber. He almost stays all the time at his shop, one or two customers a day, a few talks, a few laughters, uh, uh, time for reading, and time for fishing. He says this is the good life. In the same way, all the individuals of the life have to define their own lives to spend a good life. So, we can read biographies of great people, real life stories of courage, sacrifice, and other good values never fail to inspire readers. uh, we get inspiration from the biographies of great people, life stories of courage, sacrifice, and other good values never fail to inspire the readers. These are all the things we can find on the pages, we can find in literature, and we get inspiration to words life. Such works give the message and insight into the lives of eminent people. Obviously, the great people, the eminent people, the prominent people of the history, they gives us a lesson, a message from their lives. So we have to study all these characters and their biographies. Literature helps us find the answers of all the questions of life. Literature helps us find the answers of all the questions of life. Literature gives the answers of life. When life raises questions, literature answers. When life raises questions, literature answers. Literature means the authors, the poets, the writers. Life is always a question in itself. It is always a question. And literature always stands as an answer. So, when life hurts us, literature consoles us. How? When we are hurt, when we are perplexed, when we are perturbed, when we are frustrated, when we are upset, uh, we usually find refuge in literature, in books. We read a book and we find an imaginary world, a utopian world of our own taste, and we go there and we stay there and we feel delights, and we try to get rid the and we try to get rid all the frustrations of life. So further, literature helps us seek the meaning of our lives. We are in this world. When we take our first breath in the world, uh, uh, we come in this world. uh, we have to define our life, we have to seek the meanings of life, we have to give the meanings of life. We are given different meanings of life, we are given different identities of life. For example, we are given uh, our name, our surname, our religious identity, our cultural identity, our national identity. These are all our identities. uh, but it happens in our lives, while having all these identities, we lose the pure essence of all these identities. And what happens usually, it happens in our lives when we lose the purpose of life and we get frustrated, and there we find all the situations. Sorry, at that moment we start reading literature. Yep. When we lose the purpose of life, lose the meanings of life, we get frustrated. At that moment we bring some books, or we listen to some stories, we listen to some motivational speakers, uh, and we find the situations uh, we have been through and their solutions as well. So the present era is called digital era, when where we are using our gadgets. We don't have to study books. We can study only on our screens, on our mobile phones, on our gadgets. So it has become so difficult to find the purpose of life. It is pretty difficult because life has become so fast, and we are running, and running, and in this race we have forgotten where the life is, what the life is. When I talk about this, I remember the poem Leisure. What is this life full of care? We have no time to stand and stare. So, life and the sorrow fact is that readers are lessening day by day. The readers are lessening and the watchers are increasing. Book readers have got very less. We have only a less number of people who read books these days, but mostly study from their gadgets, from their mobile phones. I feel very awkward when a poet usually takes a mobile phone and then uh, recites its poetry. The audience is sitting uh, before him, and he is one eye is there, and one eye is there, one eye is there. So that feels very awkward, and that has become very, very awkward, and it is not being so influential. So, at the end, I would suggest all my viewers to study good books of literature. Uh, uh, it is not only a suggestion, we can go back to the history. All the great men, all the great people, they were they were good travelers, they were good readers. These two things make a man uh, a very keen observer of life. Thank you so much, all of you, wonderful audience. Thank you for listening me.
Thank you, sir, for that very interesting talk on education through literature and what
Thank
literature means and how it can educate you
Yes, sir.
beyond being literate. So, good evening, everybody. And before we leave, I request you to watch our detox. of our disruptive literacy movement by Global Dream, which has been an initiative by Dr. Sunita Gandhi since 2014. This is to ensure everyone's participation by a people's movement in helping India achieve total foundational literacy and numeracy. So basically, for all of us, each one teach one, and those of us who can teach more than one should be doing that to bridge this gap between those who are privileged and those who are not so privileged, but at least can get their foundational literacy and numeracy. We have several talks on this every day, and for more information, you can go to 740-840-1000. So thank you, everybody. Good evening, goodbye, and see you again tomorrow. And
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Mukhdoom, so much for that
Thank you.
interaction.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.